Black Myth Wukong is a big, action-packed take on Journey to the West, but it could have been even more bombastic. Unfortunately, game devs' ambitions don't always mesh with the limits of modern technology.
Dead or alive, all suffer the same.
Game science has blown everyone away with Black Myth Wukong, the studio's very first AAA title. However, fans have learned since launch that the developers originally had even grander plans for the game, thanks to an interview between SouthCN.com and the game's production team. Thanks to a translation from Reddit user Examination Asleep 122, we now know that Game Science had some unbelievably ambitious plans for Black Myth Wukong, and many of the studio's initial ideas were dropped from the final product. The first draft included 13 planned levels and a whole array of bosses and set pieces that only live in our imaginations now. We're hoping Game Science finds the time to add on to Black Myth Wukong in future DLCs, because some of the deleted sequences discussed by the production team sound like things that players absolutely need to experience firsthand.
Though you may savor it yourself, you can never tell if you truly want it or not.
Believe it or not, the very first scene of Black Myth Wukong was originally going to be very different. The story was supposed to open with an epic battle between Sun Wukong and 100,000 celestial soldiers. The devs meticulously crafted the hero's various overpowered attacks, but they were worried that letting players effortlessly destroy thousands of enemies would be more tedious than fun. The devs ultimately never got that far, as technical constraints prevented the scene from becoming a reality. Even when the devs were only using 150 enemies to represent the Heavenly Army, the game struggled to run properly on PC. Game Science decided to change its plan, but the opening of Black Myth Wukong still includes a standoff between Sun Wukong and Heavenly Forces. Of course, now the actual battle is a one-on-one fight between Sun Wukong and Erlong Shen, the army's commander.
How about you bend the knees, admit the wrongs, and we can put this behind us.
The full celestial army and a number of deities now act as imposing background props, but that prologue scene still makes for a striking introduction to the world and gameplay of Black Myth Wukong.
And they send you and those knuckleheads to threaten me, to obey and serve once more?
Some of the other early ideas that Game Science had for Black Myth Wukong weren't quite as easy to downsize and fit into the final game. The ability to transform into different animals is a big part of Sun Wukong's story in Journey to the West, and transformations also feature pretty heavily in the game. Multiple transformations can be used as combat abilities, and the destined one's various animal shapes also lead to some of the coolest exploration segments in the game. The wildest idea Game Science had for a transformation segment, however, turned out to be too unwieldy of a technical challenge. Game Science originally conceived of a spider-themed level, in which the destined one would have to take on an arachnid form and infiltrate a booming colony of 8-legged enemies. The destined one would have crawled along thin lines of spider silk, moving through hundreds of these creepy, crawly creatures. The devs treated the other spiders as particle effects, but quickly found their GPUs and CPUs overwhelmed. On top of that, the spider silk turned out to be rather difficult to see, and the stealth mechanics didn't quite gel with the rest of the game's action-focused gameplay. The scene might have looked beautiful, but the devs were frustrated as both programmers and gamers, so the decision was made to cut it. At the halfway point of Black Myth Wukong, players get a look at one of the most spectacular settings the game has to offer. Chapter 3 finds the Destined One exploring the Pagoda Realm, which contains snowy mountain peaks and a giant spooky prison. After hours of adventuring, players eventually find themselves squaring off against Kang Jin Star on the back of a giant turtle that's swimming across the sea.
He kept you alive beneath the pagoda for your own good.
The turtle scene, sadly, is much cooler in concept than in its execution. The movement through the water has no effect on the boss fight itself. In fact, it's impossible to tell the turtle is moving at all, outside of cutscenes. It wasn't supposed to be that way though. Game Science originally planned for Turtle Island to be a much bigger experience. Players would have been able to explore multiple levels of the island, including an underwater section. The turtle's movement through Bitter Lake would have resulted in environmental effects that would have required players to pay attention. Like the other deleted content, this particular section was held back by technical issues. The team struggled to get all the environmental effects to work together. There were also numerous problems with positioning the camera as players explored the area. Considering the occasional camera problems that already exist in Black Myth Wukong, it's probably for the best that Game Science trimmed this scene down.